All right.
All right. Aloha. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode in our Careers in Marine Science and Ocean Conservation series. Today, I have Grace Olson here with me. We're going to get to know her and the journey that led her from wanting to be a dolphin to a research biologist at Pacific Whale Foundation. This is a series that we're hoping is, kind of fun to get to know our staff in a different way. A lot of times we just get to know who we are and what we do in our current roles and maybe a little bit of what we studied. But for a lot of us, there's a really cool journey that led us to where we are, and there's not just one pathway to these careers. Our interests may have grown and changed along the way. So this is a fun way to know, how some of our staff ended up here, and hopefully inspiration for some of our maybe younger viewers that are interested in these types of careers, and to see what the possibilities are and how to make your way somewhere like a research biologist at Pacific Whale Foundation like Grace. So thanks so much for joining us this morning. So Grace, what did you want to be when you grew up?
It's kind of a long story, and it changed throughout time. But two pretty important things that I think are you should know about me is, number one, I grew up very far from the ocean. I'm originally from the Midwest, born in Wisconsin, and then lived for a while in Minnesota. But I've always had a passion and a love for dolphins, to the point that I actually wanted to be a dolphin when I grew up. And I don't quite know where that desire came from, because I didn't grow up on the ocean. I don't have anything specific that sticks in mind that was like, wow, I love dolphins, or watching a movie or anything like that. But here, I've got some pictures to show, a little bit about my journey to get here and the progression and evolution of what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I grew up close to the water, and I was a water baby, and I grew up close to lakes and rivers, fishing, canoeing, like that, but very far from saltwaters. And like I said, I don't really know where my love for dolphins came from, but I think it maybe had to do with they just seemed so acrobatic and mysterious and beautiful that it just sounded cool to be able to swim and be underwater like a dolphin. And as I grew up, I kind of learned that you can actually become a dolphin. So my dream kind of progressed, and I still had that passion and that love for dolphins. So I decided I wanted to be a dolphin trainer. And this desire really grew when I could start reading. I remember reading books from the library about orcas and dolphins. And this was even before I'd ever seen a dolphin in real life. So this is a picture. This is a picture I drew, I think, in second or third grade when I was still living in Wisconsin. And I've been to a marine park or seen dolphins. I'd maybe been to the ocean a couple times to visit some family out in California. But I was really wanting to work with dolphins and training them. And then as I grew up a little bit, I got to actually spend more time in the ocean, and I got to see some of my first dolphins. And that only really kind of accelerated my excitement and my desire. Like, I want to be a dolphin trainer. I want to work with dolphins. And in Florida, on a trip with my family, I got to see dolphins for the first time. And I got to actually swim with dolphins in Discovery Cove. And on that trip is also the first time my family took a trip on a boat trip to see wild dolphins. And that was kind of a game changer for me, seeing them actually in the wild. As much as it was cool to be up close and personal at that swim with program, I really, really loved being on a boat and seeing them in the wild. So I think that was about when I was maybe 13 years old. And that's when my dream of what I wanted to be when I grew up kind of changed again. And I decided I wanted to be a marine biologist, and I wanted to study dolphins in the wild. And I remember in an 8th grade class, writing and doing a report on what I wanted to be when I grew up, and wrote about I want to be a marine biologist. And I remember doing the research and saying, oh, it's going to be long, hard days in the sun, lots of lab work, all of the nitty-gritty things that go into that career choice. And I was still so excited, and I knew that's kind of what I wanted to do. And that continued throughout high school. So in my careers course, I still was consistent in I want to be a marine biologist. And I had a bit of support, even though there were some people that were like, it's a little hard to study dolphins in Minnesota or Wisconsin. There's not too many of them there, but I had support from my family. My grandmother even helped me decorate my entire room in dolphins, and every gift I ever got was dolphins. It's always been my love. So as much as it changed from wanting to be a dolphin when I realized that wasn't a thing, that's kind of been a current theme that has stuck with me, is that passion and that desire to study and just that wonder for learning about dolphins.
That's amazing. I love hearing that progression, and I love that you came to that conclusion at a pretty young age. I feel like, you know, a lot of us, I did also want to be a dolphin trainer at some point in my life, and it took me a lot longer to kind of recognize the difference and, you know, have the desire to educate about them or study them in the wild rather than in captivity. And that's really cool. You knew what grit goes into that career early on, and you were still all about it.
Yeah, it was, I really can remember seeing them in the wild for the first, being like, this is what I want to study and this is what I want to do. And I knew it wasn't going to be an easy path because I grew up about as far away from dolphins as possible.
As we can see.
Oh yes. But yeah, it's always kind of been there in one way or another.
That's awesome.
Yes, so this photo kind of shows my family. I mean, I grew up, like I said, by water and snow and ice, but my family always kind of knew that I wasn't quite meant for the cold. And so they definitely supported me in that pursuit and that dream to want to be a marine biologist, to study dolphins.
Excellent. Before we move on, because I know we've got a big transition from snow here, I just wanted to mention to everyone, because I overlooked this at the beginning, but please feel free to use the chat and or the Q&A if you have any questions for Grace. We'll be monitoring that and make sure we get to them. And before we go on, we do have a question that we might want to address right now. So that initial research that you did when you were in 8th grade, all about being a marine biologist, now that you are in fact a research biologist, do you think that it matches to what your job is like today? You feel well prepared?
It's actually kind of funny because I do feel like it was fairly accurate. It discussed not just the glorious kind of fun sounding field work of interacting and seeing dolphins in the wild. It really talked about some of that background gritty things that people don't always see, the non-glamorous side of being a marine biologist. So the lab work, the long hours, the hot days in the sun, those sort of things were all discussed. And it, I feel like it kind of, I knew it in the back of my head. And so I was prepared for aspects of that. And I was like, I can handle that. I'm going to do it for the passion. All of those more difficult things will be all worth it because I'll love what I'm doing. And I think that's still true today. Excellent.
And you were well warned. It looks like Madison also has a question. I'm going to allow Madison to ask her question. Go ahead, Madison. Sorry, yep, there we go. Go ahead, Madison.
What is the thing that you most like about dolphins?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Let me think. They are just some of the most, to me, I think they are beautiful and they are fascinating and they have an intelligence that's always been intriguing to me. One of the things as I've grown up and learned a bit more about dolphins that I think is really cool is there are so many different species and they're so diverse. They live in all sorts of different places and deep in the ocean, Some of them even live in the river. And I just find that the way they've evolved and have these different societies, these different social groups where they interact together, is just really fascinating. They're beautiful creatures. They can be acrobatic. I just find them to be somewhat mysterious, and it's just always been intriguing to me. Do you like dolphins as well?
Yes.
Oh, they're my favorite. That's awesome.
And I want to be a marine biologist too.
That's awesome. It's a wonderful job. It's a lot of hard work, but it's definitely worth it. Thank you for the question, Madison.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So we obviously have to make a little transition here in your journey, Grace. So how did you get from snow-covered and cold in Minnesota to being a research biologist at Pacific Whale Foundation?
That is a good question, because it was quite the journey. And one thing I want to say about my journey to get where I am today from up north is there was a lot of different steps in it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the experiences that I had and the opportunities that I got. But there was definitely ups and downs throughout it, and definitely wasn't a straight path. Things didn't always go as planned, but I want to tell you a little bit about some of the cool experiences that helped me get here now. And the first thing that I did to get out of Minnesota was I had the support of my family, and I attended college in Florida. So I think they all kind of knew I was not meant for the cold. I was a cold baby. You look at this photo here, my family even made a snowman with me in a swimsuit. I've never done well with the cold, and there's not too many dolphins or anything oceanic. So I first was to attend school in Florida, and I went to a small liberal arts school called Eckerd College, and it was a beautiful campus, and I was majoring in marine science, marine biology, and it was a really excellent program for studying that. And so the thing that I love most about Eckerd is that it was a very hands-on school. To be a marine biologist, you have to do a lot of really intensive science courses. So you got to be ready for that. And a thing that helped me kind of push through some of those more difficult courses was my program was very hands-on. One of my first labs in my Intro to Marine Science class, we were out on a boat and collecting data. So we were collecting water samples to look at different chemicals at different levels in the water column. So it was hands-on. It's a difficult program, but it was really valuable for me to kind of learn about other aspects beyond just the dolphins, the environment that they live in, and kind of pushed me to know that this is something I wanted to do. And so through Eckerd, I had the opportunity to kind of, in my second year at Eckerd, get my first hands-on experience with actually being in the field, so collecting data. And that opportunity was in Kaikoura, New Zealand. So I did a short-term course where I got to learn about field techniques. So how to collect data on marine mammals was actually kind of the core, looking at ecotourism. So tourism boats or vessels or programs that were trying to give tourists an opportunity to learn about and see dusky dolphins, sperm whales, and New Zealand fur seals. So this opportunity was in New Zealand, where I first really got my hands-on experience to learn about some of these research techniques. In the bottom photo, you'll see I'm in the darker blue shirt with a little machine in front of me, and that's one of the techniques that I got to learn about collecting data on wild dolphins and whales, and that's from the land, and it's called a theodolite. And it's the same sort of equipment that you would use, or sometimes you see construction workers along the road using for surveying or road construction. And that tool helps researchers with whales and dolphins actually kind of pinpoint the exact location from like a cliff or from land of where groups or pods of dolphins are. And then we were recording different behaviors and kind of tracking them that way. And then I also got to do some boat-based work where I got to practice a data collection through photo ID. So that involves kind of trying to take pictures of the dolphins as they come to the surface. And this was specifically dusky dolphins, and they're a small species, very quick. So it was quite difficult to learn to get that timing right. To what we're trying to do is take pictures of their dorsal fins. And by getting pictures of their dorsal fins, you can identify individuals. So like we have kind of fingerprints, the dolphins have unique marks or nicks and notches on their dorsal fin that we can identify them and follow them over time. So see where they're hanging out and look at if they have calves or who they're associating with, all sorts of things. So this is the first opportunity I got to really do field work and see some of these marine mammals in the wild. And it really was a very kind of powerful moment for me that kind of confirmed this is definitely what I want to do. And it was a short-term thing. I got to work with the woman, Shannon Gowans, who would become my advisor at Eckerd. And it was a really awesome opportunity and kind of pushed me forward in wanting to pursue further research. So the second thing, the kind of experience helped me get where I am today is in my sophomore year, so my second year of college, I applied for a bunch of internships. And that's one of the things that I think is really important if you are interested in marine biology, is kind of getting experiences. So whether it's field work with dolphins or lab work looking at different micro biomes, there's all sorts of things you can do, but any experience you can get is really helpful. So Eckerd had an internship program called the Eckerd College Dolphin Project, and I applied for and was selected to be one of the interns at Eckerd College Dolphin Project. And this was definitely a game changer for me. This is one of the longest running dolphin research groups that involves undergraduates, so people in college. And it was run by Shannon Gowans and Peter Simard. They became my mentors in college and really helped me in my career. Were some of the first connections and the people that inspired me and kind of directed some of where I went after this. But it was a really cool project because it was totally run by students. And this was actually one of the reasons that I ended up going to Eckerd, because I knew that they had this program and I was really excited for potentially being able to be a part of it. And so this program, we would out on a boat, students only, after we were trained, and we learned to drive the boat. We were collecting photo identification and some acoustics. So the purpose of this project was to study the bottlenose dolphins in Tampa Bay area. And so we did that field work, which was a lot of fun, long hot days in the sun. And then we'd have to go back to the office and do all of the processing. And that was a lot of work, but it was the reality of the job. I really got to see both ends of it. And through that work with Eckerd College Dolphin Project, I actually got the opportunity to kind of expand and work with a couple other groups where I got to do some more work offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. I was even able to be a part of a response effort after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010, where we went out to look at the extent of, right after the oil spill happened, I was one of the people in a vessel to kind of look at how far the spill had traveled. We were looking to see if it had made it to a certain part in the Gulf of Mexico, and I was an observer kind of looking for different marine mammals. Oh, I think Madison has a question.
Oh.
I have been in sea camp before.
Sea camp? That's amazing. Well, Robin, did you work at sea camp for a little bit?
Actually, Morgan did. Morgan, and I think some of our other staff too.
It's ocean camp, and I went to like a lot of different oceans.
Oh,
that's amazing. I totally think that experience and being able to see a lot of things about the ocean at a young age is so exciting. You're ahead of me. when I was your age, and I still had that excitement about the ocean, but I didn't get to learn about it until I was a little bit older. So that's really cool, Madison.
And I'm only 7 years old.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm so excited for you, and I love your passion and your love for the ocean. We need people like you to help study and protect the ocean. Thanks for your question.
While we're on the dolphin project, I just wanted to ask you, because I think this is kind of, I don't know if I should say helpful advice, but you said you knew about this before you were selecting your colleges, and this was one of the reasons that you selected Eckford. What did you learn about this in your research while you were looking at schools, or had you learned about this even earlier on? How did you find it?
I learned about this specific program that Eckford College offers when I was searching for schools. So when I was going through the process of, I knew that I wanted to study marine biology or marine science of some sort, and I was looking at universities on the coast. I also looked at some backup schools, or not backup, but I looked at options closer to home. So I looked at schools that had more ecology or biology programs that I think would have also been valuable. But this dolphin project and the potential of that definitely, in my research, I think my dad saw it online. It wasn't like at a college fair or anything like that. My dad found it, and I was like, let's check it out. So yeah, it was part of my college search. I think I was maybe a sophomore or in 10th grade at the time.
And good to know, I think, for people considering the hands-on experience is rare in some undergrad programs. So that's really amazing that you were able to get so much of that early on.
Exactly, and that's something really special about Eckford, is they really encourage people to get research experience. There's all sorts of other projects there with different professors that have different kind of specialties and different projects around the world, and students are encouraged to become involved. Even in the first year as students, they're encouraged to kind of experiment and learn about research, because research isn't necessarily for everyone, but if you get the opportunity to give it a try and see where your interest and where some of your skills lie, I think that can be really valuable. And so I loved that Eckford gave students, even when they were younger, that opportunity. It wasn't just wait until grad school or until you apply for internships separately to get some of that chance to practice actually doing data collection and learning about science.
Absolutely. So what was next after the dolphin project?
Well, part of the dolphin project, and another cool thing about Eckford, was I was able to do a thesis, so a senior thesis. So that means I did my own research project at Eckford that was necessary for me to graduate. So I did a study using those photos, photo ID of bottlenose dolphins, and I was looking at dolphins that were offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. And so this was a really cool opportunity for me to kind of get experience with what graduate school would be like and what actually running your own research is like. So I had guidance from other researchers above me, my committee, and they gave me a lot of guidance, but I essentially did all the processing, did some of the analysis, had to do some large presentations of the results and what I found in my research, and then I had to do a defense. So I had 3 of my committee members in a small room, and they asked me questions just to check how much I knew and understood about my project. So, and that's a big part of graduate school. And so Eckford gave me the opportunity to kind of practice that and do that. And it was quite nerve-wracking, but it was a really good experience. So I did that to graduate, where I had to do a thesis, and it was a really good opportunity for me to practice actually doing a research process at a fairly young age.
What was your study on? I know you said bottlenose dolphins. What specifically did you study?
So what I was specifically looking at was I was developing a catalog of offshore bottlenose dolphins, and then I was comparing it to some of the inshore, looking to compare it to some of the inshore ones to maybe look at movement and see where some of these sightings were. So it was a pretty, not many people had really studied some of these offshore, like up to 200 miles offshore kind of dolphins. And I'd been a part of a few offshore trips on boats to collect some of that data. And it was kind of not a complete study with the amount of time that I had. But what was really cool about it is I was actually able to take all of the individuals that I was able to photograph and identify and make this catalog. And I was able to contribute that to a larger group. So collaborating with scientists who had their PhDs, who had been running studies on dolphins in the Gulf of Mexico for years, I was able to contribute my data to that to kind of help better understand the dolphins in the Gulf of Mexico. And that was really important, especially after that oil spill, to see if some of these individuals might have been more impacted or not. So yeah, that's a good question. I initially had wanted to do a bit more with it. I had some technical difficulties in my senior year where my computer kind of crashed. So I did lose some of my data and kind of had to start over, but it was still a valuable project and one that I was really thankful to be able to work on.
Very impressive.
Yeah, it was a fun project. And so that's what helped me graduate. I needed to complete that thesis to get my degree in marine science from Eckerd, and I minored in Spanish. And after I graduated, I actually took a little bit of a break from grad school, I didn't go immediately to grad school. So I had a lot of people around me who were interested in research or had been doing other projects at Eckerd that went kind of right to grad school, and they were ready to keep going towards their career goals. And I decided to take a little bit of a break. And so after I graduated, I got a job at a small aquarium, and I worked as a marine educator. And this was a cool part in my life because I got to learn a little bit about science communication. So we were working in the actual aquarium, interacting with guests, and then I got to do some school programming and really got to learn about how important it is that we talk about or educate people about the ocean. And during this time, I also had to get a job serving at a restaurant just to kind of help make ends meet. So I'm really glad that I took that break. I was kind of burned out after college, just needed a little bit of a break. And this gave me an opportunity to kind of gain some different sorts of experiences and kind of save up some money and decide where I wanted to go next. So it was a fun opportunity and definitely valuable. I got to learn quite a bit, different than dolphins, yeah, but also important to learn kind of bigger picture things, especially through science communication. And after a couple of years at the aquarium, I applied for a position in doing research field work in the Amazon. Wow. In Brazil. And
did you use your minor in Spanish?
I minored in Spanish, yes. This position, I kind of was able to work with some of my connections through undergrad, through my years, and to help me get this position in the middle of the Amazon with a project called Projeto Boto. And Spanish kind of helped me, but they speak Portuguese in Brazil, and there's enough difference there that it was difficult, and I had to fully learn Portuguese to live there. So I was in Brazil, in the middle of nowhere, very remote area with no Wi-Fi, no internet, no cell phone service, very limited even electricity. I lived in that little house on the top there. It's called a flutuante. It was a floating house in the middle of the, on the river. And what I was doing there was helping data collection for Projeto Boto, studying Amazon river dolphins. So the pictures I have here are of Boto Vermelho, which is the Portuguese local way to say river dolphins. They're also known as pink river dolphins. And there is a second species in the Amazon called the tucaxi. So I was running their field work, essentially. It's a long-term research project that's been studying a population of Amazon river dolphins since 1993. And I got to work with some really cool people, really amazing researchers. Dr. Vera da Silva and Tony Martin were kind of my mentors in running this project. And this was a really wonderful, but difficult at times experience. These dolphins are so different than the bottlenose dolphins that I had worked with before, or even the dusky dolphins. They live in a completely different habitat. As you can see, they look very different. And we were doing photo identification. And so I got to do a lot of field work, collecting data to study this population. And then I did just as much processing. So a lot of my work was going through that data and learning a bit, not learning a bit more, but doing a different level of analysis for this. And while I was in Brazil, I kind of took a higher interest in asking some questions myself and wanting to learn a little bit more about certain things. So while I was there, I started doing my own kind of side data collection. I started collecting acoustic recordings. So I started recording some of the sounds and the echolocation that these dolphins made. There was not a lot of research done up to even now about some of that. So I really wanted to learn more about that. So it was a really wonderful but trying experience living in the middle of the nowhere. I think my mother was a little bit anxious as I was so far away. And there were times that I was very homesick. But it's kind of funny that as much as I wanted to be on the ocean and study dolphins, I ended up in the middle of a rainforest on a river studying freshwater dolphins. But it was a pretty amazing experience. I have a video. Let's see if it will play. It's just a very short clip that I wanted to show of these Amazon river dolphins because they are so unique. They're so different. They don't have that very distinct dorsal fin. It's a very shallow dorsal fin. And the habitat that they live in, this freshwater area, there's no visibility. You can't see them coming to the surface. So that makes photo ID or identifying them to study their populations that much harder. So it's a really short clip and I'm going to see if I can play it because I think, I mean, when I started this job, I think I had people in my family or even where I was from in Minnesota that were like, there's dolphins in the river. Never heard of them or seen them before. So it's kind of cool to just see a short clip of what they look like from a boat. So let's see if I can get this going.
Absolutely.
One second, sorry.
Not a problem. And actually, I know we can't see that at the moment right now, but some of us may be curious because we could clearly see in the pictures they have very different dorsal fins than the dolphins that we're accustomed to seeing. Is that still what you were using for photo ID?
Yeah, so it is. A different part of this project was because they don't have those very distinct dorsal fins, and sometimes you can't even see any of their dorsal fin when they come to the surface. Sometimes they literally will just pop part of their head out to breathe. So they're really difficult to study. So what the group that I was working with, Progetto Boto, did is we actually would do health assessments where we would capture some of the individuals, find out measurements, weight, do ultrasounds to learn a little bit more about the population. And we also would freeze brand them so we could identify them. And actually one of my pictures, I'll show you, you can see that that's how we were able to identify them. So it's a technique that's been used by a couple different research programs, but it was helpful because you're not always guaranteed to see any of that shallow dorsal fin. I'll show you kind of what some of those markings looked like on the animals. Hopefully I can get this video up. If not, I'll just go back to the picture.
Okay, all right, I think we're there.
Okay, so it's a really quick clip, but this is in Mamiroa Reserve in the central Amazon in Brazil. So you can see the water is very, very gloomy kind of looking. And let me start that over. There's the dolphins. I don't know if you could see that.
Yes.
But that's a lot of the dolphin. Often we'd see much less than this. So I'll show it one more time. I don't know if you're able to see that, Robin, but that's what a good surfacing of the Amazon River dolphins look like. So it was a lot of very difficult work to try and get the information that we needed to study them.
Seems that way, for sure.
So
just a reminder for everybody joining us, because this may be a new species to a lot of you, or anything else in general. If you have questions, use the chat, use the Q&A, raise your hand, whatever you're comfortable with.
Absolutely, ask away. I'd love to chat more about specifics. I went back a page so you can look on the bottom photo. Those are two of the Amazon River dolphins, or botos. And you can see on their dorsal fins, there looks like there's a couple letters. And the one that's got its face kind of out, that was Oris Tres Orispa, which is the Portuguese name that we gave. And then the one a little closer where you just see the dorsal fin is Xefi. So those were actually just different letters that were put in different order to kind of identify individuals. And we were able to track individuals over multiple generations. So we knew who was related to who. Really a long study that was a really in-depth look at this population and how we have a lot of information about this species, because they're difficult to study. I think.
Very cool.
Oh, yeah, so it was a really.
I thought you said you had some sounds that we could hear.
I do. So I did mention that I did some recordings of the acoustics of the Amazon River dolphins, and that is kind of where my next part in my journey went. So after I was in Brazil for almost a year, living and working, I came back to the United States and I decided I was ready to go back to grad school. I wanted to pursue the next step. I wanted to work on my master's to kind of gain more experience and learn more about actually running research. And so I spent a little bit of time in between where I was working as a nanny. I was helping out with some field work with bottlenose dolphins, again in Florida. And I was applying to grad schools. Applying to grad schools can be almost like a job in itself. It's a lot of work. And so I was sending emails out to different programs. I was contacting lab managers or professors that were in charge of specific labs all over the country and world, trying to see if there was a program that could help fund me and had a good fit for my research interests. And one thing with grad schools was I wasn't just looking, as much as I still loved dolphins, I kind of, for grad school, realized that the purpose of grad school was for me to prove that I could run my own study and I understood the process of science. So I applied for different schools that were not working with dolphins. So I looked into programs that were working with birds or frogs or other ways that I could study things that I was interested in as well. But I did end up serendipitously going to a grad school where I was able to study dolphins. I actually went to a small school called Winthrop University in South Carolina, and I was able to use the data that I collected in Brazil to, in a comparative study with my advisor, Bill Rogers at Winthrop, to look at the sounds of Amazon River dolphins. And I was able to spend a few months in Peru where I collected more data so I could compare the social sounds or some of these sounds that these Amazon River dolphins were making to see if there was any differences between these two populations. So I'll see if this sound works for you guys. But underneath the picture of the boto, or the Amazon River dolphin, that's a picture of some of the sounds that they make. So these we think are social sounds or sounds that they make to communicate with each other. And I really wanted to learn more about that. So I was looking at any differences in some of those sounds. So I'll see if I can play this. Okay. Might not work. Did you kind of hear that?
Yes, but I would recommend playing it again in case we were talking over it, maybe a couple times.
All right, I'll play it again. It's pretty quick. So kind of a little squeaky sounds. Ah. All right, I'll play it one more time. So that's what I spent my graduate school degree looking at, was analyzing hundreds of these sounds. And I was also able to work as a teacher's assistant to be funded through this research. But the really cool thing and the most important thing about grad school for me was going through the process and kind of making sure that I understood the point of research, asking questions, going through planning, how you were going to do data collection, the methods, and then actually processing and analyzing the data and doing the statistics, and then writing it all up and figuring out, kind of using other people's work, the scientific literature, to kind of make sense of some of the results or things that you found. So this was a difficult experience. Grad school is not easy, but it was really valuable for me. And I was really thankful I was able to work on a project that I was really passionate about. Like I said, I looked into other projects with chickadees, and I know that would have been a valuable experience for me as well, but I was thankful that I got to continue studying the Amazon River dolphins because I really am passionate and very, I don't know, kind of in love with them as a species of dolphin. And so after I finished my graduate degree working with Amazon River dolphins, I applied for jobs, and it's a very competitive field. And thankfully, I had all of these experiences that I talked about, working with dolphins and not working with dolphins, that I think kind of helped me be a competitive candidate. And I loved what I do, that I was able to get a position at Pacific Whale Foundation as a research assistant within about a month of graduating from my master's. So that was a journey. It took me all over the world. Got to do some really wonderful things, meet some really wonderful people that really inspired me and helped me learn about different species and the process of studying them, and also why it was really important to study them. That was one thing, especially in the Amazon, that I got to learn a bit about the conservation. It was incorporated in all of the work that I, but in the end, some of the threat facing were pretty extreme. So it was cool to see and learn more about the education and the importance of conservation protecting these species.
So you made your way to PWF, and we are so excited to have you with us. What was it that attracted you to Pacific Whale Foundation?
Oh, that's a good question. So I was really excited to apply for a position at Pacific Whale Foundation because number one, it's Hawaii. It sounds like an amazing, beautiful place to live. No, just kidding. I was actually really intrigued by the work that they were doing and the research. And one thing that I was really excited about was the prospect that the position would give me the opportunity to continue doing some field work. I love being in the field. I love collecting data and seeing the different species. But a part of the job with Pacific Whale Foundation was the other side of it. It wasn't going to be all field-based. It was going to in the lab processing, going through data control, working with the catalogs. So they do photo identification as well, which I've had most of my experience in, and actually analyzing the data to write it up and help with manuscripts, to help publish in scientific journals and use that data to actually work towards conservation and protecting these species. Another thing that really drew me to them was the conservation and education. like your part. I just, at working at the aquarium and also through some of my other positions, I got the opportunity to kind of talk about the work that I was doing and realizing how important it was for us to talk about these species and how we can protect them and educate people. And so I thought Pacific Whale Foundation having a real core values in those three things was a perfect fit for me. And I also loved that they were doing international work because I loved the international aspect of my past experiences. And I thought that was a really cool aspect of Pacific Whale Foundation.
Excellent. Looks like Madison has another question. Go ahead.
Awesome.
My ocean camp was actually Pacific Whale Foundation.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
Awesome. That we have a wonderful...
For the whole summer when I was 6 years old. Wait, when I was 5 years old. Yeah, 5.
We love hearing
That's amazing.
ocean camp participants. So glad you joined us, and hopefully, you know, things are looking a little bit different right now, but hopefully we'll get to see you back in ocean camp again soon.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's so cool you were able to join us at Ocean Camp. That's one thing like I said, I loved that Pacific Whale Foundation does, because I want to help inspire and educate younger people or anybody in the general public about how beautiful and fragile the ocean systems are and these different species that I've had the opportunity to study. And hopefully we can make some changes and try and help protect them. So that's so cool to have a young person that's so excited about the ocean and has actually been part of our camp with Robin. She's our education director. That's so wonderful.
Thanks. All right, it looks like Shelby has a question. What was your favorite whale or dolphin experience?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know how to pick. So
Or the first that comes to mind.
Well, I've had some pretty amazing experiences with the Amazon River dolphins. So they're a pretty solitary animal. They don't form big groups. They're often by themselves. But where you will sometimes find big groups of them is at an area where the rivers meet. So there's a lot of little small rivers and streams that all come together to make the Amazon. And so at that area where the water kind of comes together, it's often a lot of fish. So there's often a lot of dolphins. And there was one time that there was over 30 of them, and they were all kind of seemed to be socializing or possibly feeding. It's very hard to see some of the behavior with that dark water, but just to see so many in one area was pretty amazing. But one of the more memorable ones recently with Pacific Whale Foundation, if you look at our photos that I have up right now, the one on the bottom is of a juvenile humpback whale. And so it was last year while we were out doing field work with some of our collaborators, studying the humpback whales, which has been an awesome experience for me to learn a little bit more about larger whale species beyond just dolphins. We had this juvenile that mugged the boat. And that means that we were kind of held hostage. We had to turn off our engines because that whale came so close, and it was kind of checking us out, and it was spy hopping, picking its head up out of the water, looking at us. You could see its eye. It was just one of the best experiences of my life to be that close to such a large, beautiful, graceful animal. So that was a pretty memorable moment for me.
Awesome. We have a couple more questions here. Randall would like to know, have you been part of the whale count?
Oh, that's a good question. That's cool. You know about some of our citizen science work. So Pacific Whale Foundation has been doing great whale counts to look at humpback whales and do counts of humpback whales from land for over 20 years. And for the last 3 years, 3 years that I've been with Pacific Whale Foundation, I've been able to be a site leader and help with that work, where we have 12 sites around the island, where we get groups of volunteers, up to 10 people at each site, that are all taking part in helping to scan the water and count the number of individuals that they see within their area with a certain distance from shore. So that's been a cool opportunity to really engage with volunteers and get people excited about whale research. So yeah, that's a good question.
Absolutely. One more from Shelby. What species does that dorsal fin belong to?
Oh, good question. This has actually been one of my favorite species to study here in Hawaii. I've been able to see some new species of dolphins since I've been working with Pacific Whale Foundation, and that's been really exciting. This is a dorsal fin, a very large dorsal fin of a short fin pilot whale. And so part of my job here with Pacific Whale Foundation is actually curating or making sure everything is organized correctly and all the data is input correctly for our dorsal fin catalogs of all of the dolphin species that we see here in Hawaii. So that picture of me taking a picture of short fin pilot whale is kind of very related to what my work is with Pacific Whale Foundation, and one of my favorite species that I've been able to encounter and do some data collection with here in Hawaii.
Excellent. So I think probably we're getting to where we need to wrap up, but I have one more question I'd love for you to answer for everybody, just, you know, kind of coming back to the career journey here.
Okay.
Obviously it wasn't a direct path straight from wanting to be a dolphin trainer to PWF. What advice would you give to anybody who maybe wants to work with us at Pacific Whale Foundation, or who wants to be a marine scientist or work in some sort of ocean conservation related field?
That's a good question. So advice, I would say there, as you said, it wasn't a direct path. And for me, it took a lot of different experiences and working with different projects that helped me get to where I am today. So one of the pieces of advice I would give is to definitely put yourself out there, apply for internships and get experience in different, if you're interested in research, to get exposure to different kinds of research and different organizations that are doing research, whether it's field-based research or laboratory research, any way that you can get involved with understanding the process of science and how asking a question and going through the process of kind of collecting data and analyzing the data is really important, and kind of looking at a bigger picture of why some of these things that we're studying is important. To specifically be a researcher in marine science, I definitely recommend having a strong background in statistics. And like I said, understanding science, it's a really important part of our job, is to actually be able to do statistical analysis on that data that we collect to kind of make sense of what our data shows. And if you are not interested in that level of math, there are a lot of other different areas you can go within marine conservation or marine education or marine policy. Not everyone's going to love field work. Not everyone's going to love working in a laboratory. There's all sorts of different directions you can take, and any experience and practice you can get will be really helpful for that. It's a lot of hard work, and it's a competitive field, but if you keep pursuing and trying to gain those experiences, I think, and making connections. For me, making connections with different advisors and mentors throughout my career have really made a huge difference for me and helped me gain new opportunities. And sometimes I had to kind of put myself out there and be in uncomfortable positions and push myself. So I think that's a huge part of it. So I guess my main advice would be to kind of stick to it. You're going to have some times ups and downs, and things don't always go as planned. But if you keep putting yourself out there and trying to gain those experiences and learning skills like computer programming or statistics, if you specifically are interested in research-based marine science, that's a really helpful tools to have that kind of skills on your resume.
Excellent advice. Thanks so much, Grace. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today and getting to know a different side of Grace and her career journey. If we didn't get into any of your questions, or if you have any that you think of later on, you can email those to Grace. You can get in touch with her at Grace Olson, GraceOlson @pacificwhale.org. With that, we will say a hui ho. Thanks for joining us. I hope everyone stays safe and healthy. Aloha.